If you unplugged from the news over the weekend, like I did, you may have missed that Ted Kaczynski, otherwise known as the Unabomber, died in prison at the age of 81. He was a Harvard-educated mathematician who ran a 17-year bombing campaign. He was found unresponsive in his cell Saturday morning and pronounced dead. Several news organizations are reporting the cause of death was suicide. Kaczynski's deadly homemade bombs killed 3 people and injured nearly 24 more. They changed the way that we mail packages and how we board airplanes and virtually shut down air travel here on the West Coast in July of 1995. Before Kaczynski was arrested, the FBI's search for him led agents to Oregon at least 2 separate times. And that gives us an opportunity to head into the KGW Vault. In July of 1995, the FBI was going through a list of subscribers to a University of Oregon academic journal called Critical Sociology because they thought the Unabomber had been using jargon from the book. It was quite radical when released in the 1960s and was considered very left-wing. You may remember in 1995, the Unabomber's manifesto was published in the Washington Post, raising all kinds of ethical questions. But that manifesto caught the eye of Kaczynski's brother, who recognized the musings and reported him to the FBI.
It wouldn't have been right to allow him to hurt anyone else. He had to be stopped in some way, and that was the only way I could think to stop him.
At the time, the daily Washington Post newspaper was not available in Portland, but newsstands and stores here were swamped with calls from people who wanted to read the killer's manifesto.
I've had everybody from professors to just people off the street. I had one guy in here screaming that we were infringing on his free speech rights for not carrying it. A whole broad range of people.
And how many calls have you gotten?
I'd say 400 to 500.
Wow, how about that? The other time the FBI was involved in Oregon was that same year. The feds warned a Portland law firm that it could be a Unabomber target. The firm represented a timber company in a spotted owl case. The name of the firm and the lead attorney in that case were number 2 on a hit list in an underground environmental publication from 1990. By the way, the number 1 and the number 3 names on that list did indeed become Unabomber targets. The man at the top of the list was named Gil Murray. He was a timber lobbyist and president of the California Forestry Association. He died in a mail bomb blast in April of '95. A year later, timber industry execs were holding their annual meeting in the Columbia River Gorge. They reflected on the year since Murray's murder and then got a frightening call from the FBI. Here's John Catton.
As the industry opened its annual meetings this week in the Columbia Gorge, they talked about Gil Murray and the year since his death.
It's pretty apparent that the emotions that are tied to the issues that we deal with and to our industry have not subsided.
Amazingly, just 3 hours after Jim Geisinger made those remarks, the FBI called here to Skamania Lodge to tell Geisinger his name was found in Ted Kaczynski's residence in Montana, that the Unabomber suspect may have considered targeting Geisinger and other timber industry executives here in the Northwest.
Oh, I think my first reaction was to be thankful that the person that has allegedly committed these crimes is behind bars. I also couldn't help but think about Gil Murray and his family and what they must be going through now that this man's been apprehended.
Geisinger says the FBI told him to be cautious, but also assured him they are very confident Kaczynski is their man. They gave Geisinger no reason to believe he's in continuing danger.
It could have been any one of us that was on that list that received that package.
David Ford, another timber lobbyist based in Portland, has learned his name was also found in Kaczynski's cabin.
And of course, after Kaczynski's arrest in early April of 1996, the rush was on to the small town of Lincoln, Montana, to talk to people who may have known the man who lived in that small shack in the woods and evaded capture for 17 years. Here's former King 5 reporter Jim Foreman.
While some have described the loner as weird, folks in Lincoln, where Kaczynski was a part-time fill-in postal worker, say he was quiet, always rode a bike, but not really all that strange.
He's not in any way bizarre. He was well liked by the people who took the time to get to know him.
In fact, some in Lincoln say there are lots of so-called hermits living alone in the mountains.
Most people here, you have no idea who they are, where they came from. They either are your friends or they're not. You either associate with them or you don't.
At the town cafe, locals take in the headlines, and while we now know federal agents were staking out the area for some time, they saw no sign of them.
No, I don't think anybody knew they were around.
Fascinating stuff, I think. In 1998, Ted Kaczynski took a plea deal to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole, where he did indeed spend the rest of his days.